Okay, so Dr. Rykin, first, can you introduce yourself to the viewers of my channel? And can you also maybe briefly tell us about why you got interested in the Mongolian language and the history of Mongolic languages and the grammatical system in the first place?
Yeah, so it was a very interesting story why I chose to study the Mongolic languages and how I came to be interested in that. When I was 6 years old, I watched a movie, Mongolian movie about Sukhbatar, famous Mongolian revolutionary and the founder of the independent Mongolian state. It was an old movie, not very good in quality and so on, but I was a child and I was really impressed by all this atmosphere of steppe life and all these nomads moving on the horseback and so on. And this culture, this way of life was completely different from that I accustomed to. And it was really very interesting for me. So after watching this movie, I came to a children's library close to my home and I asked for some books related to the Mongols, to Mongolian history, and so on. And first I was given some historical novels about Chinggis Khan and the Mongol invasions in Russian. So I read them, and after them I started to read not only novels but also some scientific books about the Mongols. And when I was 10 years old, I booked some books from our Library of Academy of Sciences to my children's library close to my home, and these were books, completely scientific books about Mongolian history, publications of historical sources, and so on. So I was gradually involved into kind of deep interest to that topic, and so by the age of 17 or 16 I read already a lot of very serious scientific books about the Mongols, their history and culture. And when I entered my university, the State University of St. Petersburg, first I started to study the Mongolian history, particularly the history of the Mongol invasion to Russia and the relations between medieval Mongols and Russian principalities, the Middle Ages, Golden Horde, and how our Russian princes interacted within Golden Horde Khans, and so on. Gradually, I was interested in the Mongolian sources, and it became completely clear to me that to work effectively with these sources, I need to know Mongolian, at least Middle Mongol, the language underlying these sources. And I came to the Oriental department of our St. Petersburg State University, and I started to learn Mongolian, Halkha Mongolian, and written Mongol at that department. And of course, I read a lot of linguistic books on the Mongolian language by myself. So when I graduated from my university, I interested not only in history, but also in the Mongolian languages, in historical Mongolian linguistics. And after that, I entered a PhD program at the St. Petersburg branch of the Institute of Oriental Studies, Russian Academy of Sciences, now as Institute of Oriental Manuscripts. And when I choose a topic for my PhD thesis, it was clear to me that it should be historical and linguistic at the same time. Finally, I came to the conclusion that a proper topic for me would be linguistic, a semantic study of some terms of social organization of the medieval Mongols Empire and the period that preceded the formation of the Mongol Empire. And these were some terms tested in Mongolic historical sources first of all, in the famous secret history of the Mongols, and why, when I studied this topic, I gradually shifted from history to linguistic. So I became to read many more books on linguistics, generally linguistic, historical linguistics, the history of the Mongolic languages, Middle Mongol, Halkha Mongolian. So when I defended my thesis, I was already a well-formed linguist, more than a historian. So that was my life story and how I started to study the Mongolic languages.
Thank you so much. It's very interesting. And so my next question goes to the major part of the interviews. And could you please explain the chronological and linguistic differences in Proto-Mongolic, Middle Mongol, or Para-Mongolic, or Sorbo-Mongol, or Macro-Mongolic with regards to the evolution, geographic base, expansion, as well as the contacts with speakers of non-Mongolic language?
So, first of all, I should specify that this is topic of long-standing studies of Professor Janhunen. He wrote a lot of articles and other publications about historical evolution and chronological classification of the Mongolic languages. So I rely mostly on the result of his studies. Anyway, I think that the history of formation of the Mongolic languages and their historical evolution is far from being finally settled, and there are some gaps and mysteries in this process. First of all, we don't know for sure the chronological frames of Proto-Mongolic and when it was formed and when it was split into some other historical Mongolic varieties. But in my opinion, this split of Proto-Mongolic may be related to the early historical migrations of two nomadic groups known in Chinese historical sources as Uhuan and Xianbi. The pronunciation of these ethnic names is now known based on early Middle Chinese and Old Chinese reading of the transcriptional characters, and this pronunciation is known as Agwang or Avar and Serbi. And so these Avars and Serbi became to be known by Chinese historical sources in the late 3rd and early 2nd century BC, and Serbi seems to occupy the southern part of present-day Manchuria, and Avars the eastern part of present-day Manchuria and probably southeastern part of Mongolia. And I think it makes sense to make a connection between the possible split of Proto-Mongolic and the formation of two early historical Mongolic varieties, namely Mongolic proper and Para-Mongolic or Serbi, with the formation of these two nomadic groups. So, in my opinion, Serbi language could be identified with Proto-Serbi or early Serbi, and Mongolic proper could be identified Avar, or the language of these Avars. And this is the first mystery of Mongolic historical linguistics, how the Mongolic languages were formed, this uniform proto-language, proto-Mongolic, and what is the dating of this process. And there are many other questions and gaps in the history of Mongolic languages, and we don't even know what language spoke these historical Mongols. So their name is known to Chinese sources as Mengu or Menhua, which can be reconstructed as Mengu or Monga in late Middle Chinese, but no known information about their language is available in any written source. And except for their name, names. We don't know any words, any expressions, even any geographical or place names related to these Mongols. And so it's also a great mystery which language they spoke and what was the relation their language to the first historically documented Mongolic idiom, I mean Middle Mongol. So some scholars think that they may have spoken ancient Mongol or old Mongol, and some that probably they spoke Proto-Mongolic. So it's not completely clear. And also it's not clear how was the relations of these early Mongols of the 9th and 10th centuries to the later Mongols of Genghis Khan times who founded the Mongol Empire, as there is a kind of uncertainty in Chinese sources. Another big mystery is related to the formation of modern Mongolic languages and dialects from Middle Mongol, the language of the historical Mongols, the first historically attested Mongolic idiom, tested in various scripts: Uighur Mongol script, Chinese script, the Arabic script, Pakba script from the 13th to the 16th centuries. It's a commonly accepted fact, first expressed by such scholars as Ramstedt, Pelliot, Poppe, and some others, that all the modern Mongolic languages were formed from some Middle Mongol dialects, and so they are direct descendants of Middle Mongol. But the problem is that we have no transitory stages between Middle Mongol and modern Mongolic. So we have some obviously Middle Mongol features in some written sources of the late 16th and early 17th century, and we have some obviously modern Mongolic features in some sources of the late 17th and early 18th centuries, but we have no transition between the ones and the others. And so it's not completely known how were formed all the modern Mongolic languages and what is the dating of the formation of these languages, and probably some other idioms played some role in the formation of the modern Mongolic languages. As, for example, Professor Yankunen suggested in some of his latest publications that, for example, for Dagur, Mongolic language now spoken in the northeast of China, we can suppose a very early origin of that language, and probably it could be formed even before Middle Mongol, in the late 12th or early 13th centuries, and in that case Middle Mongol was not the direct ancestor, so it's split from Proto-Mongolic or ancient Mongol earlier than Middle Mongol, but we don't know it for sure. And some scholars tried to contribute to this issue, but due to absence of reliable historical and linguistic facts, this is only hypothesis.
This is the last question. And can you share your knowledge and research findings about the writing systems that the Mongolic speaking people adopted and created in the history? More specifically, please explain to the viewers of my channel how different writing systems enabled the preservation and dissemination of Mongolic languages across time and space, and how different writing systems led to the development of the other writing systems for the speakers of Mongolic languages.
So it's not an easy question to be answered, as we don't know for sure what was the first writing system used by the Mongolic peoples. Probably historically, the very first historically documented writing system used by the Mongols or the Mongolic speaking peoples was that very script tested in the Hust, Tolgoi, and Bugut inscriptions. So, variety of Bahmis script, Indico origin, but it's not proven enough. But anyway, as we know, uncontestably, the first historically documented writing systems used by the Genghis Khan Mongols was the so-called Uighur Mongol script, or Old script as it's often called in Mongolia, that is a vertical script borrowed from the Uyghurs, and the Uyghurs in their turn borrowed it from the Sogdians, and the Sogdians from the Aramaeans. So it's yes, finally, ultimately, this is a script of Aramean origin, and the problem is that it's not fully clear what was the language underlying. This script has many unusual features, and many features that were already non-existent the Middle Mongol period, and probably it reflected some earlier stage of the Mongolic languages, namely the Proto-Mongolic or Old Mongol, or that was a kind of writing tradition, so the script was devised intentionally for the purpose to reflect some older features, older and respectful features that were already not present in the spoken language. We don't know it for sure. Some scholars believe that from its very origin, that script was used as a kind of literary koine. So it has never reflected any phonetic reality. It was artificial from the very beginning and was used only in writing as a script that unified and was acceptable by all the Mongolian speaking groups. And you know that this script in its modified form is still used in Inner Mongolia and some other parts of China. So it's in use, and it's a very good thing that such an old renowned script is still used by the Mongolic peoples. There are some attempts to revive this old script in the present day Mongolia and even to make it second of official script in Mongolia besides Cyrillic script. But I don't know how useful would be these attempts and what would be the results of such reintroduction of old Mongolian script into its modern use in Mongolia. Anyway, this script has a very long tradition of use by the Mongols, and most of the classical literature, religious works, historical works, chronicles, official documents, edicts, and so on were written exactly in this very script. So it has a very strong importance for all the modern Mongolic peoples. But there were several other scripts used by the Mongols. Historical perspective, I should mention also the so-called Pakspa script, which was invented by the Tibetan scholar Paksba Lama in the mid-13th century. Paksba Lama was a personal teacher and instructor of Kubilai Khan, and he used the Tibetan script for this new script. And this new script was officially introduced in 1269 and was used in official documents and even in some translation of Buddhist works since then. But anyway, we have a lot of documents written in Paksba script dating from the 13th to the late 14th centuries, but after the fall of the Yuan dynasty, it was abolished in China and it ceased to be used in official documentation, and it continued to be used only as an ornamental script in some pieces of art, and from time to time even in some official seals used by the Mongolian rulers, but it was no more in active use since then. There are also a lot of other scripts which appeared since the 17th century already in the modern period. I mean the so-called Soyombo script originated in the late 17th century and attested only in a few documents, as well as the horizontal Paksba script and the Vagindra script invented by the Buryat scholar Agvando Zhiev in 1910. But neither of these scripts obtained wider use, so they used only for several documents each, and neither of them has become enough popular to be accepted officially. So the only script that were really actively used by the Mongolic peoples since the 13th century is the Uighur Mongol script or the old script, and yes, it can be called a real cultural heritage of the Mongolic peoples.
Right. What do you think about there is like about the idea of switching back to the old Mongolian script from Cyrillic to the old Mongolian script? What is your expert opinion on that?
I don't think it's a proper time to switch from Cyrillic to Old Mongolian right now, as you know that every change of writing systems involves change of educational practices and finally change in minds. So it may have long-standing consequences. And but now I think conditions are not very favorable for such a
From
decision.
the practical point of view, do you think it's practical to switch to old Mongolian script? For instance, let's say, how are we going to teach math and science in old Mongolian script?
I think it's not very practical.
But how it is practical with the technology, artificial technology?
Technologically, I think it's not very difficult as we have good examples of practical use of Old Mongolian script in China, where even the special mobile applications were devised programs based on Old Mongolian script. So it's not quite difficult. But anyway, it should take some time to reintroduce this script into official use. And if this really decided, first thing it should be used in parallel with the Cyrillic scripts. Probably journals, newspapers should be published into scripts and so on, and school books and teaching materials and so on. But you're right, it's not quite practical and it's not so urgent, in my opinion, to do it right now.
Yeah, so that's pretty much about what I was going to ask. And do you have any other questions or any other things that you want to add?
No, thank you. You have provided very interesting questions indeed, and I was glad to express my opinion to all of them. And so I think it would be enough for our talk. Yeah.
Oh.